Hello, this is Math 18, Section 2.9. Let me make sure I have my pen here. Okay, today we're looking at general equations, specifically equations in the form ax plus b equals cx plus d. Now, with all those letters, it looks crazy. X is going to be your only variable, so a, b, c, and d are going to be numbers. So here, this slide has all the directions for the entire section. So it's really only one thing today, just this one type of equation. We're just going to do a lot of practicing because the more practice you get, the better you'll be at solving these equations. So the main difference here today, we've had equations that were in the format ax plus b equals c, but we didn't have equations before that had variables on both sides. See, now we've got a cx over here and an ax on the left. And that's the part that gives a lot of people problems, is that you've got to get the variables together on the same side of the equal sign, and you want to get the constants, the b and the d, on the same side on the other side of the equal sign. Okay? So what you're going to do, your first step is, if you have any like terms on each side, not on the two sides together, but on, say you have like terms on the left or like terms on the right, you combine them on their separate sides. That's the first step, if that's possible. Now, step 2, this is where it starts getting kind of crazy, because you're going to start moving terms from one side of the equation to the other. We've done that before, but we've never moved variable terms. So that's the only real difference of what we're doing today, is we're moving variable terms from one side of the equal sign to the other. So it says use the addition property of equality to group the variable terms on one side of the equation. So as a general rule, I'm going to move my variables to the left side, which means that I'm looking at the term on the right to try and get rid of the term on the right, and that will move the variables to the left. So it'll be like Beyonce, to the left, to the left. So we're going to move the variables to the left, because you're more used to seeing x equals some number than the other way around, with like 5 equals x. Okay, so I'm going to move my variable terms in 99% of the problems to the left side. Okay, and so that's what's going to happen in step 2. I'm going to move the variables to the left. Now, if I've moved the variables to the left, that means in the next step, when I want to move the constant terms, I'm going to move them to the other side, which is going to be, for the most part, to the right. Okay? Now, once you have done that, actually after you do step 2, it's going to look like what we just did in section 2.8. So if you move the variables first, it's going to be a lot easier to look at, because it goes right back to what we just did in section 2.8. So always move your variable terms first after you've simplified. Okay? And then in step 4, you'll be able to divide by the coefficient. Okay? Or if, like in step 5, if the coefficient is a fraction, use the reciprocal and then check it. So really, after step 2, you will see an equation that we have solved before. If you move your variables first, you'll go right back to an equation that we just solved in the last section. So always try and make sure you do that first. Okay, so here's our first example. 15x minus 3 equals 4x minus 14. Okay, look on the left, no like terms there. Look on the right-hand side of the equal sign, no like terms. But I've got x's on both sides of the equal sign, so that's what I need to get them together on the same side. So I'm always going to start with the variable on the right-hand side, and I want to get rid of that 4x. So I'm going to subtract 4x, because you can subtract the whole term. 4x minus 4x is 0. It's gone. Okay? But if I subtract 4x on the right, I also have to subtract it on the left. And you put it up underneath its like term. It just makes sense. Okay? So 15x minus 4x is going to be 11x minus 3, that comes down, equals, and now on the other side, the 4x's have canceled, and we have negative 14. In that one step, I'm now back to what we just did in the last section. Okay? So you have 11x minus 3 equals negative 14. So think about this. We don't want to mess with the 11x. That's what we just moved over there. So you want to leave the 11x alone, get rid of that negative 3, because now at this point you're going to work towards getting that x by itself. So I'm going to add 3. So this is the part where I'm moving the constants, the constant terms, to the right. Okay, so variables are going to go to the left and the constants are going to go to the right. Okay, so 11x comes down, the 3's cancel. Negative 14 plus 3, if you subtract there, you get negative 11. And now the last step, we have 11x, so we divide, that's multiplication, so divide by 11. Okay, so the 11's cancel, and x comes down, and it equals negative 1. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that you can solve these problems. I'm not trying to tell you that your way is wrong. I think my way is the easiest, but you might have learned a different way in high school. So if you do it a different way, but you still get the answer correct, that's cool. I'm not going to mess with you. But if you're doing the homework problems and you keep getting them wrong and you're trying to do it a different way, it's going to be like, okay, your way doesn't work, my way or the highway, so that you can get these right and know what you're doing. All right, look at number 2. 5 plus 7x equals 11 plus 9x. No like terms on the left, no like terms on the right. So I want to move my variables. That's my first step. Get my variable terms to the left. So I'm going to subtract 9x. And I'm going to subtract 9x on the left side underneath the 7x. So the 5 comes down. 7 and negative 9 would be negative 2x equals 11, and the 9x's are gone. Okay? So we just moved the variables to the left. Now, look at your problem. If you have a hard time, this is the step where a lot of people just have a brain fart. They don't know what to do. They try and move the 11, totally wrong. Just think about it as a brand new equation. You got to leave the 2x alone. Don't mess with that. We need to get rid of the 5. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And that's technically what we're doing, is we're moving the constant, because we're moving the constant to the right, just like it said in the directions. So the 5's cancel, negative 2x comes down, and 11 minus 5 is 6. Okay, so now we're going to divide by negative 2 on both sides. The negative 2's cancel, so x equals negative 3. Okay. The main thing to do when you're doing these problems is you've got to have one set way of doing it so that you don't get confused. If you do it a different way every time, you're probably going to get all mixed up. So you kind of want to have the same kind of format of what you're doing when you're doing these problems. Okay? Number 3, we have 5x minus 10 minus 3x equals 6 minus 4x. Well, look at just the left-hand side of the equal sign. You've got two like terms there, the 5x and the 3x, and it's 5x minus 3x. That minus sign goes with the 3x. So 5 minus 3 is 2x. That's your first step, is to combine those like terms. Minus 10 equals 6 minus 4x. All right, so now it looks pretty, normal, like what we've been looking at. I've got variable terms on both sides. I want to get rid of the 4x, the negative 4x on the right. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides, and I'm going to add 4x over here on the left. So 2x plus 4x is 6x minus 10 equals 6. And the 4x's are gone. Okay? Now, think about where your variable term is. 6x, you're not messing with it. We need to get rid of that constant, the negative 10. So we add 10 to both sides. So 6x comes down, the 10's have canceled, and it equals 16. Okay? Now, the last step is to divide by 6, because that's multiplication there. Now here's the problem. 16 divided by 6 does not come out nice and even, but we can reduce that fraction. Even though it's going to be an improper fraction, just reduce it. 2 goes into both of those. So if we divide the top and bottom by 2, we're going to get 8 over 3. And if you get a fraction, do not freak out. Remain calm, okay? To check it, you would have to go back. Checking it would be gross. You'd have to go back and plug in 8 over 3 into all 3 places of those x's. So this is one I might check over my work, make sure it looks okay, say a prayer, move on, okay? Because checking that, kind of gross. All right, let's look at this one. We have 3x plus 4 minus 5x equals 2 minus 4x. Once again, we have some like terms here on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So we have 3 minus 5x. 3 minus 5 is negative 2x plus 4, that comes down, equals 2 minus 4x. Okay? So, just make sure that if you can, simplify each side before you start moving things around. That's, real important. Okay, so now I've got x terms on both sides, negative 2x, negative 4x on the right. I want to get rid of that negative 4x. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. So I'm moving the variables to the left. Okay? So negative 2 plus 4 would be positive 2x, because you have to subtract there, plus 4 equals 2. And the 4x's are gone. Okay? Now, we've got the 2x there. The variable term is, one term now, but I need to get rid of that 4. So you move the constant to the right. Subtract 4 from both sides. So 2x comes down. The 4's have canceled. And 2 and negative 4 gives me negative 2. And the last step, we just need to divide by 2 on both sides so the 2's cancel. And over here, when we divide, negative 2 divided by 2 is just negative 1. Okay, number 5. We have 7a minus 5 equals 2a minus 20. All right, look at the left. There's no like terms on the left side, no like terms on the right side. So I want to start by moving my variables to the left. So I want to get rid of that 2a. So it's positive, so I use a negative 2a. So notice that I always do it in the same type of format. Move my variables first to the left, and it just makes it easier. I mean, I had a high school teacher that said, "You will do it this way." She didn't really talk like that, but still, you want to make sure that you're doing it the same way so that you understand the steps of what you're going through. So 7 minus 2 would be 5a, comes down, minus 5. The 2a's are gone, so it equals negative 20. Make sure you bring that sign down. Now, we want to keep the 5a, don't mess with it, so we need to get rid of negative 5. So add 5 to both sides. So 5a comes down, cancel the 5's, and negative 20 plus 5 would be negative 15. Okay? And your last step, divide by 5 on both sides. The 5's cancel, so a equals negative 3. All right, number 6. 4y minus 8 equals y minus 8. So, no like terms on the left, no like terms on the right. I'm going to start by moving my variable to the left side. So I want to subtract y and subtract y over here. Now remember, there's a coefficient of 1 in front of that y. So 4 minus 1 is going to be 3y minus 8 equals, the y's are gone, negative 8. Okay? So now you're going to move the constants to the right side. So don't mess with the 3y. You need to get rid of that negative 8 there. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides of the equal sign, both sides of the equation. So 3y comes down. The 8's cancel. All right, and over here it equals, and everybody says, oh, those cancel. They do, but it cancels to 0. So you have to make sure you write that 0 there. And you're not done. You still do the same steps. Divide by 3 to get rid of that coefficient. Okay, you use division. So y equals 0. All right. Okay, so here's a couple more. Now, here we have 9y equals 5y plus 12. So, we don't have any like terms on either side, but on the left we only have just a variable term, so we don't have a whole lot of moving around to do. I still want to get that 5y over there with the 9y. So I'm going to subtract 5y from both sides of the equal sign. Okay, so that's going to be 4y, and then the 5y's cancel, so it equals 12. Okay, and now we don't have any more steps except to just divide. So this one was a little bit shorter. I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. The 4's cancel, so y equals 3. Okay, Now, look at number 8. This is the one exception to the rule about me moving the variables to the left, because on every single problem that I've done so far, I have moved the variable terms to the left. I've canceled the one on the right and moved it to the left. But look at number 8. 2b minus 10 equals 7b. Notice on the right-hand side, there's just one term, 7b. So if I can get the 2b over there with it, then I've got all the variables on one side and just a constant on the other. Okay, so if you have an equation where there's only one variable term on one side and nothing else with it, move the variable to that side. It'll make your life a lot simpler. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to get rid of the 2b. So I'm going to subtract 2b. Or not 2b. Ha ha, little Shakespeare there. All right, so I'm going to subtract 2b from both sides. Now what happens is the 2b's cancel, and negative 10 comes down, and it equals 5b. So in that one step, we're now down to just dividing to get our final answer. Okay, so divide by 5, because remember we're trying to get b by itself. Oops, divide by 5. The 5's cancel on the right. So b equals negative 10 divided by 5 would be negative 2. Okay? It's not wrong if you move the 7b to the left, but if you do, then you have to move the negative 10 to the right, and most people screw it up. So if you see a side of an equation that only has a variable term, that's the easiest side to move your variables to. Okay? All right, here's a couple more examples. So I told you there's a lot of practice in this section because it just gets confusing if you don't have one set way of doing it. Okay, so 8b plus 5 equals 5b plus 7. So once again, I can't combine any like terms because there's no like terms on either side. So I'm going to start by getting rid of that 5b. So I'm going to subtract 5b from both sides. Okay, so 8 minus 5 is 3b plus 5 equals, the 5b's are gone, so I have 7. Okay, now don't mess with the 3b. You just moved it there, so now you need to get rid of that 5, get rid of the constant. Subtract 5 from both sides, so 3b comes down, the 5's cancel, and 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay, now you need to get the b by itself, so we just have multiplication there. Divide by 3 on both sides, so we get b equals a fraction, 2/3. Okay? Let's look at number 10. 5n plus 3 equals 2n plus 1. So look at the left, no like terms. Right side, no like terms. So I want to move my variables to the left. So just remember, variables to the left, constants to the right. Okay? So I'm going to subtract 2n from both sides. So that's going to give me 3n plus 3 equals, the 2n's are gone, so it just equals 1. Now the next step, don't mess with the 3n, get rid of that constant that's on the same side. So subtract 3 from both sides, 3n comes down, the 3's are gone, and it equals negative 2. 1 and negative 3, you get negative 2. And now, to get rid of that coefficient, remember it's multiplication, so divide by 3 on both sides. Okay, the answers are almost the same. N equals negative 2/3. But totally different numbers because one's positive and one's negative. And as you know, those signs are huge. They make a big difference. Okay? All right, so here's some for you to try. So pause the video, try these on your own, and see how you do. Number 1, 4x minus 7 equals 5x plus 1. So no like terms to combine on either side. I'm going to start by moving my variable terms to the left. So I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. So 4 and negative 5 is negative 1x minus 7 equals just 1 because the 5x is canceled. Now, don't mess with the negative 1x. Get rid of that negative 7. So add 7, do the opposite, okay, to move. Anytime you need to move terms from one side of the equation to the other, it's always addition or subtraction, always, okay? It's only when you're trying to get rid of just the coefficient, just the number out front, that's when you use multiplying or dividing. All right, so negative 1x comes down, the 7's are gone, equals 8, okay? And now to get rid of that coefficient, it's multiplication, so I divide by negative 1 on both sides. The negative ones are gone, so x equals negative 8. Okay? Excuse me. Number 2, 6x minus 2 equals 7x plus 5. So no like terms on either side. I'm going to start again with moving the variables from the right to the left. So I'm going to subtract 7x. 6 and negative 7 is negative 1x minus 2 equals 5, because the 7x is canceled. Okay? Don't mess with the negative 1x. I need to get rid of that negative 2. So add 2 to both sides. So negative 1x comes down, and it equals 7. All right? And your last step, use your division. Divide by negative 1 on both sides. So the negative 1's cancel, and x equals negative 7. Okay, number 3. M plus 4 equals 3m plus 8. So no like terms on either side. So same steps. Okay, I know people are like, oh, this just seems boring. But you know what? When you get the answers right, it really makes you feel good. So boring is good sometimes in math. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 3m from both sides. Now, be careful. Remember that coefficient on the m is a 1. So 1 and negative 3 is going to be negative 2m plus 4. And the 3m's are gone, so it equals just 8. Comes down. Okay? Now, don't mess with negative 2m. Now we move the constant to the right. So I subtract 4 from both sides. So negative 2m comes down. The 4's are gone. And 8 minus 4 is just 4. And the last step, divide by negative 2 on both sides. The negative 2's cancel, so m equals negative 2. All right, let's look at number 4. 10x minus 3 equals 3x minus 1. So no like terms on the left, no like terms on the right. I'm going to start by moving my variables to the left. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. So 10x minus 3x is 7x minus 3 equals negative 1. So be careful. Make sure you bring that sign down with the 1. That's very important. And the 3x is canceled. So now don't mess with the 7x. Get rid of that negative 3. So add 3 to both sides. So 7x comes down, the 3's have canceled, and negative 1 plus 3 is going to be positive 2. And now the last step, divide by 7 to get rid of the coefficient. So those cancel, and you get a fraction. X equals 2/7. Yuck. But, you know, whatever. All right. Here's 5 and 6. Let's see what we got going on here. 13b minus 1 equals 4b minus 19. No like terms to combine. Okay, so we're going to start, and I'm going to get rid of that 4b. So I'm going to subtract it. Subtract 4b from both sides. So 13 minus 4 is 9. So 9b minus 1 equals, the 4b's are gone, so it just equals negative 19. Okay, that comes down. Now get the constant. Okay, so get rid of that negative 1. So add 1 to both sides. 9b comes down. The 1's have canceled. And negative 19 plus 1 is negative 18. Okay, remember your sign rules. And the last step, divide by 9. So the 9's cancel, and b equals negative 2. Okay? All right, number 6. 6y minus 1 equals 2y plus 2. Once again, we don't have any like terms to combine. I hope I put some in here. Okay, we'll see. So I want to get rid of that 2y. I'm going to subtract 2y from both sides. So 6 minus 2 is 4y minus 1 equals just 2, because the 2y's canceled. Okay? Now, don't mess with the 4y. Get rid of that negative 1. So add 1 to both sides, and 4y comes down. The 1's have canceled, and it equals 3. Now, you can see this is not going to come out nice and neat, but still do your steps. Divide by 4 to get rid of the coefficient, okay? And so the 4's cancel, and y equals 3/4. Just end up with a fraction, okay? All right. Good grief. I didn't do any with like terms. I should have. Okay, so we have 9 minus 4n equals 12 minus n. So no like terms on the left, no like terms on the right. So I'm going to move the variable to the left. So it looks weird, it's just that negative n, but you're going to add n to both sides. But just remember, on that n is a 1, okay? So the 9 comes down. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3n equals 12. And the n's are gone, okay? Now, don't mess with the negative 3n, okay, because that's what you just moved over there. We need to get rid of this 9. It's a positive 9, so I'm going to subtract 9. Always do the opposite when you're moving from one side of the equal sign to the other. So the 9's are gone. Negative 3n comes down, and 12 minus 9 would be 3. Okay? And then your last step, divide by negative 3 on both sides. So those cancel, and n comes down, and 3 divided by negative 3 would be negative 1. Okay? And the last one, number 8. We have negative x minus 4 equals negative 3x minus 16. So, first step, no like terms. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this negative 3x. I'm going to add it to both sides. So I'm going to add 3x on the left also. Remember, that's a 1 in front of that negative x up on top. So negative 1 plus 3 would be positive 2x minus 4, and then the 3x's are gone, so it equals negative 16. Okay? Now, the next step, don't mess with the 2x, get rid of that negative 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. 2x comes down, the 4's cancel, and it equals negative 12. All right? And the last step, divide by 2 on both sides. So the 2's cancel, and x equals negative 6. So please make sure you practice these equations, because it is kind of confusing when you're moving things from one side of the equal sign to the other. But after you get the kind of format down, it's all the same. It's not that big a deal. All right? And that's it for 2.9.